By now, all Americans know that voter suppression is in full vogue. The first state that has really comprehensively attacked minority voters, low-income voters, voters that have problems getting to the polls, Georgia. They just passed a law, and we had Senator Warnock from Georgia speak about it. Now, it's funny because as soon as Democrats wins Georgia, but not control of the local houses, they decide to make it very difficult for Democrats to vote, for people who likely would vote Democrats to vote. But anyhow, that's beside the point. Today, Pat Toomey appeared on Chuck Todd, and Chuck Todd asks him to defend the bill. I want you to listen to this, and then let's take it on the other side.
One last question. I want to ask you about the voting rights issue, but I want to play a statement from your colleague on the Democratic side of the aisle, Raphael Warnock. Here's what he had to say about voting rights.
We wouldn't have to have this debate about the filibuster, at least on this issue, if the folks on the other side would do the right thing and stand for voting rights.
I want to separate out H.R. 1 from the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Do you believe there are 10 Republicans to do an updated version of the Voting Rights Act, something that used to be fairly easy to get done in a bipartisan way? I know the issues with H.R. 1, and I'm trying to separate the two. Where are you on this?
I haven't drilled down on this distinction that you're making. The Democrats have been driving this message on H.R. 1, and I think we ought to be asking our Democratic colleagues, why are they so insistent that we not have any mechanism to verify that a person seeking to vote is, in fact, the person that they say they are? Why are they so insistent that people ought to be able to go ballot harvesting, maybe go through a nursing home and get a couple of hundred ballots that just happen to be whatever they are? I mean, there is a completely false narrative about so-called voter suppression. You look at the Georgia law. There's no voter suppression. Sunday voting is still allowed. There's an expansion of in-person voting. There's no requirement that you have a reason for a mail-in ballot. All you need is some verification of ID, and so does every Department of Transportation in America in order to drive. So does every airline if you're going to get on a plane. So this has been a false narrative entirely, Chuck, and I'm afraid it's all about trying to get rid of the filibuster. We're not going to be cowed by being called racist over policy that has nothing to do with race.
I understand your point of view there. I'm just curious, though, do you think it's a good look for the party that after a presidential loss, after the former candidate basically creates a false narrative and lies about why it happened, that these laws are getting changed under a false pretense? That's not a good look for the Republican Party, is it not?
I was very critical of President Trump along the way after the election, as I think you know, but we should be honest about this. We made very dramatic, sweeping changes to accommodate the circumstances of a global pandemic that had huge implications. And some of those sweeping changes include provisions that are really actually tough to verify the accuracy of the vote, and we have an awful lot of Americans who are worried about the integrity of our system. So some common sense measures like requiring an ID to get an absentee ballot or to vote, that just makes a lot of sense.
Senator Pat Toomey, Republican from Pennsylvania. Always appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective with us. Thank you, sir.
First of all, for those who believe that Republicans that remain in the Republican Party, somehow there's some of them like Toomey that are moderate and somehow don't follow the same methodology that the right wing follow, which is to suppress votes, to not give people the support they need, to not support policies for people. That this is a classic example. He supports what was done in Georgia. Now he rolled Chuck Todd. And how did he do that? What he said sounds plausible, but it's simply not true. It's wrong. The reality is all the mail-in votes and all these laws were passed by a Republican legislature, a Republican state Senate, and signed by a Republican governor. They supported it. The problem is that when Stacey Abrams and her cabal brought out all the people to vote, Republicans lost, so now they want to change the rules. But that it is deeper than that, because what Chuck Todd allowed him to do is to describe the new law in a form that says, is it so bad to ask somebody to prove who they are? Is it so bad for you to have more people vote in person as opposed to by mail? That's the narrative they want to put out there. What they don't want to tell is, numero uno, People don't vote illegally in general. And why don't they do that? Why do that for minimal results? And it's a heavy crime. And it's been proven already. The people that have been found trying to vote illegally this entire cycle has been Republicans that were Trump sycophants. But let's go beyond that. What Chuck Todd missed is, since he said we're just trying to make people more feel better about the vote, that the vote is honest, it's secure. Remember, the only people that are telling you that the vote wasn't secure was Donald Trump and his cabal. But he forgot to tell you, how does not giving a mother with a kid, a grandmother in a line that you created, a line that you made along by not having enough equipment in the lines, how are you making that safer by not allowing people to give water? And if somebody gives you water in a line, it is a crime, punishable. How is it not voter suppression if what you're doing is shortening the time that people who work have to vote? You got to go to work. How are you going to get to vote if your polls are closing early? You can't do that. But more ominous is this. If the legislature feels that they don't want to accept a particular county's votes as legitimate, they can overturn it. That is the most blatant thing not being spoken about right here. That this gives power to the Georgia legislature, irrespective of what the people vote, to say we are not accepting your results. This is what we are going to do. So Chuck Todd didn't ask him about those 3 items. Those 3 items, among many others, are bad enough. But he should have asked about those 3 items. What about every location must have the same amount of voter machines? What that means, there will be no lines in rural areas, but there will be lines in urban areas. I mean, there's so much to this bill that just proves how it is nothing more than voter suppression. And Chuck Todd got rolled, and that hurts us all. Because America then gets the impression that Democrats are simply going crazy because they changed the laws, as opposed to there are legitimate reasons that prove this is voter suppression. And Chuck Todd allowed Toomey to come onto his program, create propaganda, and create a false premise as far as what that Georgia new law represents. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number 1, subscribe to our channel, and number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.